Israel. Israel with a Y in front of it. All right, so this is part 2. I'm not going to recap part 1 on purpose, because if you haven't seen part 1, you need to go back and listen to the part 1. Otherwise, you're going to probably be lost. So do yourself a favor. If you have not seen part 1, go back and look at that at this time before we continue on. So here we got migrate. Why do we migrate from Israel after Christ? Remember, I told you before on part 1 that Luke 21, and here's the verses. Luke chapter 21, verses 20 through 24. And this is Jesus talking, and he says, "When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then you will know that the time of its destruction has arrived. Then those in Judea must flee to the hills. Those in Jerusalem must get out, and those in the country should not return to the city. For those will be the days of God's vengeance, and the prophetic words of the scriptures will be fulfilled. How terrible will it be for pregnant women and nursing mothers in those days? For there will be disaster in the land and great anger against this people. They will be killed by the sword or sent away as captives to all the nations of the world. And Jerusalem will be trampled down by the Gentiles until the period of the Gentiles comes to an end." God's word for God's people. Here's a letter that Paul wrote, and I'm just going to read the highlighted portion, Hebrews 12. And again, I'm using the New Living Translations in these verses because it's easier to understand, but you can use whatever version that you feel more comfortable with. Hebrews 12, reading verses 6, 7, and 8. "For the Lord disciplines," and this is answering the question. This is Paul's answer to the question of why would God, a loving, merciful God, do this to his chosen people, the Israelites. And here's the answer. It says, "For the Lord disciplines those he loves, and he punishes each one he accepts as his child. As you endure this divine discipline, remember that God is treating you as his own children. Who ever heard of a child who is never disciplined by its father? If God doesn't discipline you, as he does all of his children, it means that you are illegitimate and are not really his children at all." That answers it right there, folks. He's giving you divine discipline. He's correcting you. So, who were the inhabitants of Negro land? Again, that was from part 1 where I showed you that map of Negro land. Carved out area of West Africa. Call it Negro land. Why would you need to call it Negro land if everybody in Africa is black? Well, for this discussion, we have to go back to the days of Noah. And we have to talk about his 3 sons who repopulated the earth. And you can go to Genesis 10 for their offspring. Those names will come in handy at some point. So we're going to talk about Japheth, Shem, and Ham. So the ark of Noah came to rest in the mountains of present-day Mount Ararat. That's in Turkey. They remained in close proximity until the Tower of Babel. So they stayed in that same area. They started having offspring. The people started to grow. The Tower of Babel was thought to have been in present-day Iraq. One of the sons, his name was Nimrod. He was a son of Cush, reigned at the time of the Tower of Babel being built. This is where they thought humanity thought they were going to be big and bad and build a tower high enough to go up and challenge God. And God was not having that. And he put an end to it. And the way he did it this time was he confounded everybody's language so that they could not understand each other. And therefore building had to come to an end. So here is the land that we can see how it was carved out when they gave out the lots of land. You can see where the green was the land given to Ham and his sons. The yellow was the land given to Shem and his descendants. And the red area was what was given to Japheth and his descendants. Notice here they have this area that's in red, a red box. That area is called Canaan. That was a disputed area of land, because as they were going from this area where the ark rested, and they were going around to the land that was given to them, Canaan decided that, hey, I like this land, and I'm going to take it, even though that was not his allotted land. His brothers tried to plead with him. He didn't want to have none of it. He wanted to stay there. So, and to this day, this area is always being fought over. The land of Canaan. But you see, it is in green, so that means that he was a descendant of Ham. So before the Tower of Babel, before they got to that point, Ham disrespected his father by uncovering his father's nakedness. Now, looking at that on the surface, that doesn't mean much. It's like, what's the big deal? The son has the same as the father, so why would that matter? But if you go to Leviticus 20 and 11, it tells you what uncovering your father's nakedness really means. And here it is. Leviticus 20:11, and the man that lieth with his father's wife hath uncovered his father's nakedness. Both of them shall surely be put to death, their blood shall be upon them. So this was Moses' writing. So this came after, Noah and his sons. But it explains what uncovering your father's nakedness means. So Ham committed incest with his mother. And this would explain a lot of the sexual wickedness that comes later on from the child known as Canaan. The Canaanites were sexually wicked people. Now, the Bible doesn't say that Canaan was actually a product of that incest. It doesn't actually come right out and say it, but it would explain the sexual wickedness of the Canaanites. Now, most people know the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. Well, Sodom and Gomorrah, they know those were sexually wicked cities, and those cities were in Canaanite territory. And God rained down fire and brimstone on them because of their wickedness, their sexual wickedness. So let's look at Genesis 9, verse 25 through 27. And he said, "Cursed be Canaan." This is Noah talking. "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren." And he said, "Blessed be the Lord God of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. God shall enlarge Japheth, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant." Now, those are some pretty prophetic words when we unpack it, and I'm going to explain it. Now, normally we always focus on the curses, and we overlook the blessings in the prophetic words. So we're going to look into those prophetic words, what they're actually saying. So in the spiritual meaning, that same passage we just read, it says that may the children of Shem be covered by the blessings the children of Japheth be covered by the blessings of Shem. In the physical meaning, the children of Shem will build dwellings or tents, and the children of Japheth will live in them. Sound like some of the places here in the United States, built by slaves, lived in by descendants of Japheth. Prophetically, the Canaanites would be servants of servants. So when the Hebrews invade Canaan, they made them slaves. They had the backing of God. They went in there and they wiped out the Canaanite areas and they made them slaves. But later, the Hebrews, when they started being wicked themselves, they were invaded and became slaves. So that would make the Canaanite people slaves of slaves, as was said in those prophetic words we just read. So I already mentioned that the Tower of Babel, God changed man's language so that they could not continue to build that tower, trying to challenge him. And so now they dispersed to their allotted areas of the earth, which I showed you before, the green, yellow, and green, yellow, and red areas. So this is what our present map of the world looks like, give or take. This is what the earth was thought to have looked like thousands of years ago, where all the different continents were smashed together, and they called it Pangaea. Now, the Bible does talk about many earthquakes over the years. It's quite possible that they could have broken apart and given us what we now know as today's map. It's possible. And that would help explain, how when certain people who claim to have found land, when they discovered a land or territory, found that there was already people living there. I'm just saying. So Japheth goes north and becomes the Europeans and the North Asians. Ham goes southwest and becomes the African continent. And Shem inhabits what we call the Middle East. Ham was allowed to acquire great knowledge, alphabet, numbers, astrology, shipbuilding, metalworking. The first great civilization was created, ruled by Nimrod. The second great civilization the first civilization ruled by Nimrod came through Cush, which was a son of Ham. And then we got the first great civilization, Egypt, which was from the son of Ham, called Mizraim. But remember, God uses all things for his good. So this is a rabbi from back in those days, or not in biblical days, but a rabbi that came along. He was known for telling stories from the Torah in a way that is what they call exegesis. He did not put his own twist into it. He called it as he read it from the Torah. And let's look what he has to say. He says, and this is a quote from one of his writings, he says, Shem was especially blessed black and beautiful. Ham was blessed black like the raven. And Japheth was blessed white all over. I'm just giving you the quote. You guys can take that for what you mean, for what you want. But he was known to be a rabbi who tells stories from the Bible as it was written. Let's look at Zondervan's Compact Bible Dictionary. And it tells you about Ham. It says he's probably the youngest son of Noah, born probably about 96 years before the flood. Remember, they lived hundreds of years back in those days until God put a limit on it. It says he became the progenitor of the dark races, Africa. But it says not the Negroes. So it was the Egyptians, which I said was Mizraim. The Ethiopians, which was Cush. The Libyans, which was Put or Foot. And the Canaanites. which came from Canaan, not the Negroes. So from Shem, if you follow along the lineage that's spelled out in Genesis, Abram comes through Shem's bloodline. The first Pharaoh in Egypt became appointed. Pharaoh actually means someone who creates a revenue or taxes from the dead. You can read about that more in the book of Jasher if you're interested. Like I said, that's a great book. And like I said, it's mentioned in the Bible as a reference. So it's not just some book off the shelf. Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed. Abram, which became Abraham later, rescues his nephew Lot from capture. Returning from that particular war, Abram runs into Melchizedek, which was a priest. It actually was Shem. If you read the book of Jasher, it tells you who Melchizedek was. And he gives a tenth of everything that he got from that war. That's the first tithe. Abraham has his first son from Ishmael, named Ishmael, but Ishmael was from his concubine, his wife's maid. So that was not the child of the promise, where he was told that he would be the father of many nations. Later, he had Isaac from his wife. Now, you know the story about Isaac being sacrificed. Abraham was supposed to go sacrifice Isaac to God. He was being tested. But what you don't know, unless you read the book of Jasher, that Isaac was 37 years old, almost 37 years old at the time of the sacrifice. So he was a grown man. So if you just read Genesis, you would think he's a young boy being sacrificed. So it's easy for his father to overpower him. But he was 37 years old. So obviously, Isaac was in agreement when his father told him what God told him to do. Because obviously, he could have overpowered his dad and said, "Dad, you're out of your rocker. You sacrifice." So here's the book of Jasher, and I'm just showing you some of the areas in red. This is chapter 17 of the book of Jasher. It says, "And in those days, in the 91st year of the life of Abram," or Abraham, "the children of Chittim made war with the children of Tubal." So Chittim and Tubal, those are European areas. "For when the Lord had scattered the sons of men upon the face of the earth, the children of Chittim went and imbibed themselves in the plain of Canopia." So they went up in the mountains and built themselves cities and dwelt there. And I'm just going to skip down to 5. You can always, pause this and take a snapshot and read it. But do yourself a favor and download that book of Jasher. And after you read Genesis, give the book of Jasher a read. It fills in a lot of the blanks that you have, a lot of the questions. But skipping down to verse 5, it says, "For all the daughters of Tubal in those days were fair, for no women were then found in the whole earth so fair as the daughters of Tubal." So this is where people started to become light-skinned. Also, book of Jasher, chapter 22. And here's what I said. Verse 41 says, "And when Isaac was 37 years old, Ishmael, his brother, was going about with him in the tent." So they were arguing back and forth. But that's how old he was when Abraham took him up to offer him to the Lord, as is shown in verse 44 in red. Verse 52 of chapter 23 says, Isaac said unto his father, I will do all that the Lord spoke to thee with joy and cheerfulness of heart. Ain't that something? 37 years old. And he was told by his father that God wanted him to sacrifice him to the Lord. And Isaac said, I will do as the Lord spoke to you. So here's where one of the places where the book of Jasher is mentioned in the actual 66 books of the regular Bible that we're used to. Joshua chapter 10, verse 13 and 14. Verse 13, it says, So the sun stood still, and the moon stayed in place until the nation of Israel had defeated its enemies. Is this not recorded in the book of Jasher? The sun stayed in the middle of the sky, and it did not set as on a normal day. The book of Jasher. There you go, folks. It means the book of the upright man. Download it and read it after you've read Genesis. Trust me. So Genesis 15, chapter 12, verse 12 and 13. This we read this before in verse part 1 of this series. About Abraham going to sleep and having a dream. And he was told that your seed or your descendants will be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them for 400 years. And I've already explained about the 400 years. It says also that nation whom they shall serve I will judge, and afterwards they shall come out with great substance. I already said, it was 430 years that they were in Egypt, and they were not afflicted for most of that time. Read it and do the math yourself. So here's a little map showing you the journey of Abraham when he left his father's house in Babylon area, in Ur, and he traveled up to Haran and to Damascus, into the land of Canaan, into the land of Egypt when they had the famine, back into the land of Canaan. That was his journey. And you can see all the little cities that are mentioned there during the story of Abraham. How when they came in there, when the Lord told them to go in there and take over a city, they would clear out a city with just a couple of people, a couple of the sons. It might be Reuben, it might have been Judah, it could have been Levi, but they only took a couple of them in many cases to wipe out an entire city because God was with them. And those stories of them taking over these towns became legendary. And people were terrified of them because God was on their side. Nobody could do anything with them. So Isaac is the child of the promise. He has the promise, and his descendants will continue the promise. And he has twins, Esau and Jacob. Esau was first, and he was named based on his appearance, which was red and hairy. It was mentioned in the Bible because he was different from those who came before him. Jacob was named based on his actions. He was grabbing his brother's heel at birth. So a heel grabber translates to someone who supplants or who takes over. Now there is a video that I don't have the link for it, but if you look up Jacob and Esau, I will try to get the link and post it at a later time. But there is an Esau video that explains the Jacob and Esau's story and why they become so opposed to each other. Esau hated Jacob because Jacob wound up taking over his birthright. But Jacob didn't really take it from him. Esau gave it to him. Esau didn't have any value, didn't give his birthright any value. And he sold it to Jacob for a pot of stew, a bowl of stew. So Jacob has his name changed by God to Israel. Now, again, I'm just skipping over this history just to give you some idea of the time frames, but there's a lot of history in between there and a lot of story in between here. But God changes Jacob's name to Israel. Israel means one that wrestles with God. Now, this occurred one day when Jacob was traveling and he had sent his family on across a body of water, and he stayed behind. And that night, he wrestled with God all night long. He would not let God go until God blessed him. So names and words have meaning. Israel means one who wrestles with God. Now, don't lose sight of the fact that we're not really talking about wrestling, because that wouldn't be a fair fight. That wouldn't be a fight at all. That's like a 2-year-old trying to wrestle with a grown man. He'd just be grabbing onto the man's leg, basically holding on for dear life. So Israel was clinging to God. If you wrestle with somebody, you have to be in close proximity with them. So he was clinging to God. And that was considered, he did it all night long, which was counted to him as perseverance. And God changed his name to Israel. Jacob has 12 sons. The 12 sons are the 12 tribes of Israel. One of his sons was named Joseph. This son was sold into slavery by who and why? He was sold into slavery by his brothers. See, Jacob favored Joseph. And because he favored Joseph, the other brothers got jealous of that. Joseph was a son who also was able to interpret dreams. So while he was in slavery in Egypt, he rose up to second in command in Egypt, because God's favor was on him, giving him the ability to interpret dreams. Due to a famine that came across the land later on, his family had to go to Egypt to get some provisions, some food. They had to go see the second in command, which was Joseph. Now, the brothers didn't even recognize Joseph. He blended in with the Egyptians. So what does that tell you? The Egyptians or the inhabitants of Mizraim are descendants of Ham. Ham is the dark races. And Joseph blended right in with the Egyptians. So he was also of a dark persuasion. So his family comes over to Egypt, and Joseph feeds them, and they become honored guests among in Egypt, in Mizraim. They gave them a piece of choice land to live. They didn't actually mix in. The Egyptians really didn't like the Israelites, but they tolerated them. They had their own piece of land because Pharaoh knew that these were the family members of Joseph. So now Joseph's father dies. Jacob or Israel dies. And they want to go and bury him. They go bury Joseph in the land of his fathers. When they come back, not Joseph, excuse me, Jacob, Israel. When they come back, and their numbers continue to increase, and there's a new Pharaoh in town now who rose to power. This Pharaoh didn't know Joseph. He didn't know that all Joseph did for Egypt or Mizraim. And so because of the growing numbers of the Israelites, he said, hey, wait a minute, we got to deal with these people. These people are getting larger in number than we are. Now, if you read it, it tells you that there were 70 souls that went into Egypt when they first came to Egypt because of the famine. By the time they left Egypt, there were 600,000 men, and that's not even counting the women and the children. So Pharaoh starts to oppress them and enslave them, give them hard labor with their taskmasters. And that's when Moses' story comes into the play. He comes on the scene. God tells him to go set his people free. Moses himself was able to pass as an Egyptian prince at one time. So Moses also was a dark-skinned person. God demonstrates his power to Moses by changing his hand to white, then back to normal. Go ahead and read it. I talked about that on part 1. Exodus 4, verse 6. There's more proof that Moses is a black person. So the Israelites are freed by the power of God. They leave. Moses parts the Red Sea. They're over by Mount Sinai. And Moses receives the 10 Commandments. And there's 613 some odd other laws that he receives that he writes down himself. So the 10 Commandments are written by God himself in tablets of stone, and Moses writes the other 600 and some odd laws that set Israel apart. So being set apart simply means holy. But now, because they are hungry and tired of eating and don't know where they're going, they're complaining. God says, okay, you want to complain after I just took care of you and brought you out of slavery? I'm going to have you wander the desert for 40 years until everybody who was complaining died. Only Joshua and Caleb of that generation survived and were allowed to enter the promised land. So here is the land, how it was carved up from the 12 tribes. Notice that there is no landmass for Joseph. That's because Joseph's sons from Egypt, which were Ephraim and Manasseh was actually the older brother, they were claimed or adopted by Joseph's father, Israel. So Joseph's land was given to his 2 sons. That's why you see Manasseh and Ephraim on the map and not Joseph. All the others were sons of Israel or Jacob himself. Notice that there is no land for Levi. The Levites did not receive any land because they were given the priesthood. So being the priest of God, they didn't need a landmass. So Joshua was a representative of the tribe of Ephraim. So he's the one he's one of the people who brought them into the promised land, along with Caleb. Caleb was reported to be the author of the book of Jasher that I've told you about. So time passes on. We get to King David's story. He descends from the tribe of Judah. And in 1 Samuel 16 and 12, David's described as dark and handsome. David's son Solomon becomes king after David dies. And if you read the Song of Solomon, chapter 1, verse 5, one of Solomon's lovers state that she is dark and beautiful, but then also in 5:10 says the lover states Solomon is dark and dazzling. After King Solomon, because he did some things that God was not pleased with, basically he was bedding strange women that God had told them, the Israelites, not to intermingle with other women, other strange people, because he knew that they would take the people away from him, meaning they would have the Israelites worshiping other gods. So the kingdom was divided. Israel was in the north, Judah remained in the south. Judah is given the kingdom as the Messiah was to come through his lineage. Look at Genesis chapter 49, verses 8 through 12. Israel continues to transgress or violate God's laws and statutes. Israel, which was the northern kingdom, was destroyed by the Assyrians. Judah transgressed against God, sinned against God, just like Israel had, the northern kingdom had. So God sent judgment against her also, and their land was conquered by King Nebuchadnezzar some 136 years later. So they didn't learn from their northern brothers' errors of their ways. So here's what it looked like when they separated. The northern kingdom was Israel, the southern kingdom was Judah. Notice that Jerusalem was in the southern kingdom. Read the parable of the wheat and the tares. I don't have time to get into that now, but it's a good parable. Those who have ears to hear will understand it. Jesus often spoke in parables, and the reason why he did that is because the Old Testament said that he would, and it tells you that in Psalms chapter 78, verse 2 through 6. Read the whole chapter, though. It's all good reading. So there's that Luke chapter 21, verse 24 again. So God sends an enemy from the north to destroy the temple and Judah for the second time. That enemy is spoke of in that Luke 21, verse 24. And that enemy is Rome. The Israelites flee into Africa as their forefathers did when trouble arose in their land. They migrate into North Africa, into Libya, Carthage, into Portugal, into Spain. Key is reading about that, the Spanish Inquisition. You read about the Spanish Inquisition, that is your missing link. And I will do a teaching about that at some point, but we don't have time for that at this point. So North Africa, Libya, Carthage, Portugal, and Spain. Some of the people settled into, there you have it, Negro land. So here's Revelations chapter 3. I'm only going to read the red portion, which is verse 9. And it says, "Look, I will force those who belong to Satan's synagogue, those liars who say they are Jews but are not, to come and bow down at your feet. They will acknowledge that you are the ones I loved." So the Jews in the land of today use the lineage of their mother to determine their Jewish heritage. And the Jews in Israel today don't believe that Christ has already come. Those should be red flags for you folks. Biblically, they always list lineage from the father. So why did they decide they're going to do it from the mother? If I tell you you're acting childish, I'm telling you that you're acting like a child. So what does it mean if I tell you that you're Jewish? I'm just saying. 2 Chronicles 7:14. This is very important here. It says, then if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sins and restore their land. It says, my people who are called by my name. So now that requires you to say, well, what is his name? I'm going to do a teaching on that very shortly. So in conclusion, has the 400-year prophecy already been fulfilled or not? 1619, when first slaves arrived in the U.S. versus plus 400 years, that would be 2019. So we will see. Are you descended from Shem, Ham, or Japheth? Your answer? More than likely, it's going to be all of the above, but it's from Shem. It is from Shem, plus the intermingling with the other races or other people. This is a little clip from the Israeli Tourist Authority. They're talking about the Negev Desert. And it just says this is the only place in the world. You can take a screenshot of it and read it. Open it up so you can read it. But it's basically saying this is the only place in the world where the desert is being reversed. It's actually starting to grow green again. Pretty interesting, huh? But read it for yourself and do some research. I tell you, I'm not going to spoon feed everything to you. But this is the end of the second part 2 of this opening series for I'm Just Saying. I hope you guys enjoy the information that I've put forth for you. I said the future teachings will not take as long as this. I'll try to keep them to like a half an hour or under because I know how busy people are. But I just want you to see that and understand who you are. The whole Bible is about you. It's written by you. It's written for you. It's written to you for the benefit of the world. So if you don't know, as Biggie says, now you know. Praise God. Worship God. Praise the Son. Accept the Holy Spirit. I'm out, y'all. Peace.